Millions of people follow exhausting, restrictive diets every single year to try to live longer. Yet chronic illnesses like heart disease and cancer remain the leading causes of death worldwide. A major part of the problem sits right on our grocery store shelves. The standard Western diet is built heavily on refined grains. Foods like white bread and white rice dominate our meals, but the data is clear. They offer zero protective health benefits. We know this because of an enormous body of evidence. Researchers have analyzed 45 prospective studies involving hundreds of thousands of people, alongside the historic Nurses' Health Study, which tracked thousands of women over a 30-year span. From all that data emerges a surprisingly clear signal. The most reliable way to increase longevity doesn't come from cutting out entire food groups. It comes from adding 2 specific types of food to your daily routine. Securing these health gains doesn't require starvation. A single strategic substitution creates a measurable shift in the body's defense against disease. This chart compares the health impacts of refined grains against whole grains. As you can see, white bread stays at a 0% baseline. But if you consume just 90 grams of whole grains a day, your risk of cardiovascular disease, cancer, and all-cause mortality drops by 11 to 22%. That brings us to our second food group, nuts. Across the decades of research, frequent nut consumption shows a powerful, dose-dependent relationship with living longer. The more often you eat them, the lower your total mortality rate falls. Looking at this line graph, we can trace that risk reduction step by step. Starting from a baseline of 0, each additional serving steps the risk down further. When people eat nuts 7 or more times a week, they experience a 20% lower death rate compared to those who avoid them. And you don't have to buy expensive tree nuts like almonds or pistachios to get this effect. Everyday, affordable peanuts provide a nearly identical reduction in cardiovascular and mortality risk. The consistency of this data suggests that whole grains and nuts act as structural shields against the world's most common fatal diseases. But how does all of this actually work? If we zoom from population data down to microscopic cellular function, we can see exactly what happens inside the body to trigger these life-saving effects. Whole grains contain the endosperm, germ, and bran, which are incredibly dense in dietary fiber. When you eat them, that fiber blunts the sharp post-meal insulin spikes that cause long-term metabolic damage. Now nuts handle your entire vascular system. Because they're packed with unsaturated fats, they actively lower your total and LDL cholesterol levels, helping to keep your blood vessels clear and functioning smoothly. This scale illustrates what happens to your body's inflammation levels. On one side, harmful inflammatory markers like CRP drop. Simultaneously, protective hormones like adiponectin rise, directly increasing your cell sensitivity to insulin. This helps explain a major calorie paradox. Even though nuts are energy-dense, these systemic hormonal improvements mean people who eat them regularly actually maintain a lower body mass index and carry less visceral fat over time. These foods are dense packages of bioactive compounds. By improving insulin control while clearing cholesterol and reducing inflammation, they systematically close off the biological pathways that lead to aging and disease. This graph reveals a steep plunge immediately at the curve's beginning. The most vital disease risk reduction happens moving from 0 to moderate intake. While peak benefit requires 225 grams daily, most biological payoff is captured simply crossing this initial threshold. Hitting that 90 grams target is simple. You can reach it by swapping a morning pastry for a single bowl of whole grain breakfast cereal, or by using 2 slices of whole grain bread instead of white bread for a sandwich. For nuts, the barrier to entry is just as low. A mere 1.5 ounces, about 43 grams, of nuts or peanuts per day is enough to trigger that 20% drop in mortality. A flawless, punishing diet isn't a requirement for living longer. By making just 2 moderate substitutions starting tomorrow, you actively shift your biological trajectory toward a healthier future.